I don't know what to do. I have to testify, but I don't want to. Do you think they're going to fire me? And she said, whether or not you testify, I think they're going to fire you. Like that seems to be the path. And he's 67. He had survived cancer, and he was so terrified of just not working. He couldn't think of not having a job. He didn't think of a plan to retire, right? And unfortunately, he overdosed on pain pills and wound up in a coma for several days. And he eventually, in a week, died at the hospital with a destroyed liver. And his wife was by his side.
That's so sad.
Ugh. And no one at Theranos sent flowers or any kind of sympathy to his wife. They sent her a note and threatened her to not speak about his experience with Elizabeth or Theranos.
Bunch of
but
assholes.
She told them, there's a bunch of assholes. She told them to bug off.
Yeah.
Like, the truth is on my side. I can say the truth. All right. So let's switch, because now she's going to become a star. The year is 2014, and her media profile explodes. Covers of Forbes, Fortune, Inc. She's in the New Yorker. She's on the cover of the New York Times Style magazine. Suddenly, Elizabeth Holmes is a very big deal, and she's constantly doing interviews, and she's constantly on panels. And in the New Yorker piece, Ken Oletta says that he calls this comically vague, but this is what she says about the technology. I can't do it in her voice. I'll do her voice in a minute, but here it is. Well, let me try in her voice. A chemistry is performed so that a chemical reaction occurs, generates a signal from the chemical interaction with the sample, which is translated into a result, which is then reviewed by a certified laboratory personnel. That is a big word soup.
That was a really good impression.
Thank you. But I don't have any idea what I just said.
No.
And this is another thing. She would not show people the devices. Mm-hmm. She would not show them in action.
Webster's dictionary defines chemical reaction as.
It's kind of like a Santa Cruz surfer kind of thing you got to go for. And she'd also would sit in a chair. She would like lean over with her shoulders. And instead of crossing her legs at the knees, she would cross her ankle across the knee. So it was like she was all sharp angles. And people were really like enthralled with her.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Forbes recognizes her as the youngest self-made billionaire. Kylie Jenner would take that title eventually. But
quote unquote self-made. Hashtag self-made.
Oh, God. That family is a whole other thing. But Theranos was valued at $9 billion at this point, with more than $400 million in venture capital.
And by the way, it hasn't created like a working machine at this point.
No.
Okay.
No. And they also just checking. They rigged the machines so that if it was malfunctioning, the lights indicate that it was like, you know, when you're downloading something from the internet and it shows like 20%, 30%, right? It would gleam like at 70% and then just kind of hang there. And then people would be like, oh, we just need to boost this to get whatever. It just meant that it was malfunctioning. Like they created a false screen. Yeah, they would turn it off and on again, but they would create a false screen so that people couldn't tell it was malfunctioning. They thought, oh, it's just downloading and it's slow. That's all. So it just, the fraud that exists is just incredible. Her name appears on 18 U.S. patents and 66 foreign patents. And that was part of the problem, by the way. It's our flawed patent system. That's a whole other thing to talk about someday. But she becomes the youngest person to win the Horatio Alger Award. And Elizabeth and Sunny now have their own security teams. She is Eagle 1 and he's Eagle 2. And there are 20 people assigned they hire just to do their security.
Jesus.
And they have bulletproof glass on all their office windows. Yeah. She has her own personal chef who mainly makes green juices for her. And she travels by Gulfstream jet. This is just, it's crazy.
Yes.
So George Schultz's grandson is a kid named Tyler Schultz, and he's a recent Stanford grad, and he starts working for them. We'll get to Tyler in a minute. But there's a big speech that happens around this time in 2014, and it's at SFN. And this is where Elizabeth unveils the nanotainer, which is this small device that's supposed to hold that little prick of blood, and you can do all these tests with it. And the way she does the demonstration, she takes it out of her pocket. It's like when Steve Jobs would show the iPad or the iPod phone or whatever, right? Like it was that kind of, the demonstration was a big deal. And it was a big, big hit. And this is the first time she mentions this story, that she had an uncle that she was very close to, and she loved him so much. And one day he developed skin cancer. It spread to his brain. And that and she missed him and she loved him so much. He never got to see his kids grow up. He never got to do this or the other thing, right? She mentions this over and over again at her speeches. It turns out he only died 18 months before. Not like when she was a kid. Now, if you were to listen to it, you would assume she was right. And they were not especially close. And furthermore, her family members who knew this thought it was really tacky that she brought this up over and over again. But the rest of the audience was completely mesmerized by her. And at this time, she's really refined her style. It's all black head to toe, hair in a messy bun, extra eye makeup, and a bold red lip.
And she shaved her head to look like Steve Jobs.
So her CCO, and she got cancer to look like
She really
went all in.
She went all in.
She was into the cosplay. Her chief creative officer is Patrick O'Neill, and he decided her face should be like the logo, the image for the Theranos brand. And he hires documentarian Errol Morris to create the advertising and the marketing videos. And the sight of them fangirling all over each other is a wonder to behold. Yeah, well, this is part of Shy Day. I think that's the name of the LA agency that they hired. And they hired at $6 million a year to do advertising for a product that doesn't work.
Their next client was the Fire Festival. No.
We'll get to that asshole one day. So let's get to her Arizona rollout, okay?
Yeah.
Many of the Walgreens in the state were offering Theranos tests, and they didn't have FDA approval for their devices, because the machines didn't work once again. So what people would do is they would show up thinking they would just need a finger prick, and instead it would be a venous draw, which they'd have to draw blood, take your blood and not just put it in this machine and then give you a result in half an hour. They would ship it overnight to a Bay Area lab and then give you results. And the results were often wrong. And for example, Tyler Schultz mentions this. He was there for to test for syphilis. So they gathered 100 samples of blood from people who actually had syphilis. So it's detecting, can you find it, can you not find it? It was correct in detecting it 65% of the time. And let me tell you, if you've got syphilis, you got to deal with it. It's not those things. Yeah, that's how Al Capone died. It rots your brain. And in Arizona, there were several instances of people that would get faulty readings on their tests. There was a woman who was recovering from breast cancer, and it said that her hormones were completely out of whack, and she was terrified it was coming back again. There were people, they were told that their thyroids, there was something wrong with their thyroids. They would show up at their doctors. Their doctors would see these tests and say, holy shit, you need to go to the hospital. You can have a heart attack any minute. People go to the hospital, and the hospital will be like, there's nothing wrong with you.
It's so awful. Like,
it's so messed up.
There's nothing more like anxiety inducing than like medical stuff, right? Because you can like just really fuck with your head, and that's awful.
And people, you and I know what it's like. You go to the hospital, that's a couple of $1,000 a day. I mean, just take the ambulance to the hospital is expensive. Here in America, if you're around the world and you have, socialized healthcare, good for you. But it's expensive.
Like, build a house for me on your property, please, and I will move
Yeah, please. Also in 2014, Theranos claimed to have made $100 million in revenue. I want you to put a pin in that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So somehow Theranos is attracting major investors, even though, like I said, they will not show you the product. The Walton family was 150 million. Rupert Murdoch was 125 million. And the DeVos family, lovely Betsy DeVos, our education.
We'll be getting to her later.
Our education creep. Her family donated 100 million. And these people are billionaires. They could lose 100 million. It doesn't affect their lives. That's how rich they are. Overall, Sunny and Elizabeth raised over $1 billion. Also, there were a lot of people who would just read all this press and decide, oh, this is going to be a hot new company. I should invest in them. There's several people who basically put their life savings into Theranos, not just these rich people. So people lost their nest eggs over Theranos. Now, I want to introduce you to a pathologist named Adam Clapper. And he had a blog, and you're going to love this. It's called The Pathology Blog, BLAWG. And Adam is a righteous dude. He's totally into science. And he read the New Yorker article and was like, what the hell is going on here? There's no peer review research going on here. And then so he contacts Elizabeth, and Elizabeth cites a paper she co-wrote in the Hematology Reports. So Clapper looked this up, and it turns out it's an online Italian publication that will publish anything you want for a fee of $500.
Cool.
And on top of that,
cool.
And on top of that, her data was also based from a total of 6 people. And so the ad agency I mentioned before, Day, which is, by the way, getting $6 million a year, they were often stymied from getting information. In particular, Sunny. Sunny did not understand why they were so picky, quote unquote, about the copy to write for the ads. For example, if you say you can perform hundreds of tests, you actually have to prove you can perform hundreds of tests. Sunny would just ignore it. And so they couldn't get these, you know what it is to put marketing materials. Like it has to be, you got to run it by people. And they would just sometimes, Sunny and Elizabeth would just go dark for a month and they just wouldn't hear from their client. And around this time, former Theranos employees and people being sued by Theranos are starting to talk to each other secretly. And everyone wants to out them and put a stop to this because people are getting nervous. Like they're actually testing people now, right? They're actually working on people. It's one thing if somebody agrees to be a part of a study. It's another thing when you're charging people money for a product that doesn't work. But the problem is that Elizabeth now has a new lawyer, and his name is David Boies. And he is world famous for being tough. He sued Microsoft and made Bill Gates sweat for hours on the stand, like 20 hours on the stand. He was a part of Al Gore's Florida election thing. He worked to get gay marriage approved in California. And he also repped Harvey Weinstein.
Oh, so, cool. Once again, the circle, you guys. The circle of creeps.
He was given stock in exchange for money for being their legal guardian. And the man was famous for scaring, I wrote this down. He's famous for scaring the shit out of people. So, Adam Clapper knows about this, the blogger. So he contacts John Carreyrou at the Wall Street Journal and says to him, you got to look into this story because I think this is the phoniest of balonies. There's no way this is true. And he's like, look, I'm a blogger. I can't afford to take on David Boies, but the Wall Street Journal can. And Tyler Schultz, who had been working for Theranos for a few months at this point, he realized how terrible the culture was and how secretive it was and that people were freaking out about how the machines were not working. And tests that were commonly screwed up were for the thyroid, and you'll like this one, pregnancy.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to really know.
The tubes in the machine would break apart, and to get your hand in there to take things out was like dicey. And the nanotainers that I told you before, those little things, they fell off a table so easily. They were really hard to manage. Elizabeth's big thing was she wanted the machines, originally called the Edison, later they were called the MiniLab, to be about the size of a microwave oven. And she was furious when told that the laws of thermodynamics just wouldn't allow this. You can't say no to Elizabeth for anything.
Science! Foiled again!
And this is the pattern dealing with Elizabeth. A team member would tell her the truth. She would be furious. Hours later, you would have Sunny screaming at you. So people were